for a country like India, and it is a good time we are alive.
Yeah, I also think on the same lines. I also think certain things changed. So it all began from 1991, I guess, जहाँ पर we had this revolution, जहाँ we removed this license Raj and
Yeah,
sort of made our economy a little bit liberal. I would not say like it's completely liberal, but we started moving towards free markets and stuff. वहाँ से our biggest startups, I guess, two or maybe more than two, Wipro also, like TCS, Wipro, Infosys, ये सब
Infosys.
companies
Yeah,
वहाँ से started हुए. So I think Infosys ka boom was one of the things which made Bangalore a hub for tech, and
yeah. Y2K
once
happened
Bangalore
then.
became that, and then do you realize that if multiple people who are super talented come in like just 1 square kilometer or maybe one conference, a lot
Things
of
about
good
the same
things
place.
come up, right? So I think that was one reason, uh, because Infosys came up, it sort of indirectly benefited other people. A
Yeah.
lot of people
So
work together, even maybe in Infosys, and they realize that hey, what the heck are we even doing? We can probably solve something using the same thing, same lines of code, and like revolutionize our industry.
So what really happened is कि India had two really important things after liberalization in 1991 92. So India has people who understand English, like a certain degree of people who understand English, and they're good at maths. So
Hmm.
the whole service sector was imported sort of to India, right? And
Hmm.
Bangalore happened to be that place where there were the people who understood software to some degree, and frankly there was cheap labor. So Bangalore sort of became the place, as you mentioned, there were a lot of people who were willing to do the job and the same place. So Infosys and these companies are in some sense the pioneers. I mean, we don't call them startups now, but these companies begin
But
the
they
trend.
are.
And yeah, they are uh, and then the Y2K happened. So that whole date change thing in 1999
Hmm.
2000, that really
Hmm.
boomed the ecosystem. So Bangalore was the place.
Also, one more thing which comes to my mind right now is we really don't appreciate the fact that um, we were nowhere in the service sector, to be honest. Like, all we did was agriculture. We still do a lot of agriculture. Almost 50% of the population does agriculture. You can argue that it doesn't like, contribute that much to the GDP, but end of day, 50% of Indians are doing agriculture. Uh,
Yeah,
at the same time, we don't realize that this service boom might have also come from uh, the fact that the tech support ecosystem that got built in India. So even if you think of it as just a learning thing for a person, if they get into like tech and then they start exploring other avenues, they know that these companies are doing certain things which my kids can also do, and then they give their kids the required
kind of
education, and
education.
then yeah, and I sort of believe that this they most of the people in West sort of make fun of Indians as the IT support people,
Yeah,
but I think somewhere that thing was actually helpful to India rather than
yeah.
doing something bad. So also at the same time, if you think about it, startups have just become like, as you said, we don't call Infosys a startup, even though it's going to touch
Yeah,
I think
it already
it
touched probably
recently
100.
touched
Yeah,
100 billion
billion
100
market
billion
cap dollar.
MCAP. Yeah.
Yeah,
And which is amazing, right? You have all these
amazing.
companies like Apple who are in trillions of dollars, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, they're touching 2 trillion mark, I guess. And we have a company in India which which sort of started uh, way after Apple did, and uh, in a country where you don't have a lot of people working in tech, and they have gone like 10 billion, 100 billion dollar valuation, which is I think really amazing. But still,
So
the fact that I want to highlight here is we never called it a startup. what do you think the term? When do you think it became relevant in India, and what, what are
I
the pioneers?
probably, as far as I remember, InMobi was the first sort of startup that they forayed into mobile message advertising. So, startup as a term itself came to India very late. So the tech bubble happened in US, and after a lag of 3-4 years, so we just began to see these companies in terms of startups. Initially, we used to
Hmm.
see things in terms of services and businesses. So
Hmm.
it is a pretty recent phenomenon. It's just been a decade. We have been seeing this word startup or entrepreneur in media, and the fact is they are finally able to get that sort of validation or acceptance in the societies as okay. This is also cool. This is not. This is obviously very risky, but at least now they do not reject it on the face value, the person being doing a startup. So this is really a transformational change in terms of people's mentality. So there was a time when
Hmm.
we didn't even recognize these people who were entrepreneurs or engaged in this. These were very risky avenues for your career and were not thought of as sustainable. But we have come a long way from that point.
Um, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, just going back a bit, and you can trace that in Indian people's DNA also. How many people invest in stocks compared to USA? Almost nothing, right?
Yeah,
What 2-3% people are actively or passively investing. Uh, Compare that to USA, where 50% people are doing that, and that shows you the. Uh, and at the same time, we hold a lot of gold, and it's not like people don't understand the value of compounding and all. They do invest in real estate. They do invest in gold. They do know that values go up in some time, but all they want is the stability. They don't want to take risk
yeah,
essentially. Uh, the fact that only 1 to 3% people invest in stocks leaves very little room for people to have that sort of acceptance where someone is going out and saying that, hey, I will be starting a company and I don't care if it runs in loss for next 20 years or so. I know that this thing is going to be useful and I'm just going towards it.
okay. I think it probably just a cultural thing. India as a society itself is risk averse, I would say, because we sort of want to preserve things. It is same in education, right? We want stable career options or career tracks or educational tracks for our children. So that's why our country is a country of engineers. No matter people like it or not, but the parents, some sort of way, have this thought in the back of their mind ki being an engineer or being a doctor or being in these professions would set you for life. But now
Actually,
things
like
are
Malaysia.
changing, norms are
Right.
changing. So as you said about gold, it's it's like India always understood the power of money, but it's like they were never taking a real action to unlock it. Like you said, in US economies, 50% are investment. That is a huge number, and we don't stand even close to it. But now with the coming of startups and this whole information boom, now everything is accessible to you.
Hmm.
This whole information is creeping in, and people are now realizing that wealth creation is not taboo. I mean, it's you could actually pursue it. You could actually unlock wealth, and slowly, and probably we need more intervention into it, and we need you know, it should happen at a faster pace. That people should come into financial markets and invest, but it would happen. I mean, if you see the culture nowadays, at least in the age bracket of 20 to 40, people are really understanding the power. And I mean, COVID and this whole stock market frenzy recently in the last 2 years really, I mean, changed everything. The Robinhood happened, retail investors on Zerodha and everything. They just spiked up. So, I mean, people will realize at some point of time, and probably it might need to happen early, but it would happen.
Yeah, I mean that's precisely why we are also late to this whole fad, right?
Yeah.
In You see, Apple. I have this. I follow a account on Twitter which supposedly shares old email threads from old companies about certain things they do. And I
Okay.
saw an email thread about Larry Page talking about acquisition of YouTube for
Oh,
something like 10 to 15 million dollars because they recently got a funding of $5 million, and that was sort of very old. Like at that particular point of time when they were doing that in India, you wouldn't even think of having something on online. I don't think I even had like a computer at
internet.
my home at that
Yeah, yeah.
point of time. Like leave
So
alone
first,
internet. I'm just saying, even if I could just go and like use the computer as it is, I didn't have that option. uh, I don't understand why it was so late in India. I sort of don't know the reasons to that. But certainly that's why the fad of startups became sort of delayed in our country.
so what I think is it is step by step process, right? So for startups, the tech startups to be there in any country, you need to have certain infrastructural requirement beforehand. So it's like you need access to market, you need sort of tech infrastructure and people to support it. So personal
Mhm.
computing itself came very late to India. Like I'm just guessing it probably came after, because it came into US properly in 80s and 80, 85 and 90, and then it became mass by 2000, and then the US had this tech startup bubble in 2000. So we were not even there at that scene. uh, and on the other side,
But do you realize it was sort of Apple who brought
personal
uh,
computing,
personal computers, even though a lot of other companies tried, but they never
right?
nailed the product, and hence not a lot of people use personal computers. But if you think about it, Apple is a startup. You can't really blame computers for not having a startup, right? Apple was funded by venture capitalists, the likes of Sequoia. Um,
Yeah.
I I believe like Sequoia started funding Indian startups way later than what they have done in US.
So
Or we
it's
never
it's
saw
probably
Sequoia in India.
it's probably due to the fact that the startup, what a startup actually is, there is an idea which is a very risky endeavor, and there are very few chances to succeed. So for a startup or a team to carry that idea, there needs to be financial backing, which was aptly provided by VCs in US. So the VC culture itself came very late to India. So VC thing started in 1960s in US. It became popular with Sequoia, Vanguard, and all these groups in 1970s or 80s. I don't know. So it happened with that Fairchild, Intel, the treacherous eight, if you might have heard, after they discovered the semiconductor transistor,
Hmm. Hmm.
William Shockley and all, and then they kind of open all these companies, Cleaner and Perkins. But the VC itself came late to India. So as I'm telling, in 2003 or probably two, we had one of the first few VC sort of setups in India, and for the first time, India had sort of people who could invest, right, in
Hmm.
startups. So
I also think I have a very different thought in mind. You can trace back the VC culture of US to like very like
yeah,
maybe hundreds of years back. Think of it like this, right? If you know the fight between uh, uh, what Tesla did, right? He basically wanted to have this alternating current way of life.
yeah,
He didn't had the money. You have to realize that he didn't had the money. He had backings of several industrialists who were hoping to produce these AC equipments if Tesla had succeeded. So uh, you see, a lot of inventions in US took place because of people were funding those scientists, and that's precisely
yeah.
what VC is.
VC
While we
is
consider them as scientists, those were the inventions of those times. Now we are inventing something else. We are inventing maybe electric cars. Maybe we are inventing reusable rockets. Uh, we just don't happen to consider Elon Musk a scientist, but end of day, I think what he's doing is very
innovator.
new to this world, right? That's precisely what Tesla was doing some years back, and he had a backing, a private backing. Of this blame has to go to the British people who colonized us, and
Yeah,
uh, we ended up having an ecosystem where we're just fighting for freedom and we're not thinking of inventions or
So
anything. And that's the another reason why our education is so messed up, because uh, when we want some funds, we just go and look up to the government. We never think of a private person funding us and we getting something valuable out of it, and then we giving the rights to the private person to produce it and distribute it so that they also benefit. We don't follow this mutual benefit policy.
So I completely agree. I mean, so they US already comes from a capitalist mindset. I mean, wealth
Hmm.
focus. Everybody is focused on wealth. In India, till 1947, we were struggling for self-rule, and then we got independence. After that, there was a country to build, right?
Hmm.
So let's say 44 decades, 5 decades, and still it's still an ongoing process. Went into nation building, basic infrastructure, setting up roads, highways, educational institute. So
Hmm.
sort of we really never had that time. I mean, but if you look from the time frame of 2000, when personal computing and internet sort of boomed in the US and slowly made its way to India, it's a pretty fast growth in by any margin of metric, right?
And
So
I think that growth was escalated in last 5 6 years.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, agreed.
we have absolutely seen disruptions in every possible domains in last 4 5 years. We have seen Indian companies coming up and beating US based companies to the ground. Uh,